Hey, in today's video, we're going to have a look at my preferred way of making websites scale responsively, fluidly, however you want to call this, across multiple breakpoints, in Webflow specifically. So if you're new here, my name is Ilya. I'm an independent web designer and creative Webflow developer, and also the co-founder of Osmo. Osmo is a platform that I'm building together with Dennis Snellenberg, who you might know from his portfolio, which also scales nicely, or maybe some of his beautiful client work, award-winning dev, great human, and he built this type scaling system, or not necessarily just for typography, but just for scaling websites in general. And back when we were launching Osmo, this was one of the first resources that we published as a free one. So it's actually already available as a Webflow clonable and a CodePen link if you're not a Webflow user. I'll put a link to those in the description, but since it's also part of our Osmo Vault and the core of all of our projects, we decided to make a video to give you some more context and background information so you'll hopefully have a deep understanding of how this works and to be able to apply this in your projects comfortably. Now, a heads up that I have to give you, this does not work with users changing their preferred font size in the browser settings. So this is really suitable for projects in which you want to control the design layout across every device. But the downside is that it's not fully accessible for users that have set their font size to be larger on default. So that's just a heads up, but let's get into this. The scaling system is part of our vault, and I'm actually going to search for it using the quick find. And over here, this is basically everything that we need. On this detail page, we've put together some documentation. And whether you're a Webflow user or a non-Webflow user, the only step that you'll have to take is adding some CSS to your project. If you're unsure how to do it in Webflow, we've put together a quick tutorial where, in this case, also I will teach you how to do that. But you can also just follow along in this video because actually we're going to do a quick live build of this hero section. I've prepared part of it. I'm going to do some things live to sort of talk you through how the system works in practice and how you can use it to make your websites responsive across a mobile breakpoint and the things in between. Now, I think the best way is to just get started. So I'm on the detail page. The first actionable step, since we don't have to copy any of our structure to Webflow, is just to copy the CSS. And then we're going to head to this semi-prepared project of mine. And then in the embed, we're going to open it up. Just going to have to make sure that you have some opening and closing style tags. And this is just to make sure that, some basic styling. Ignore that. This is what it's about. The scaling system. Now, over here, what we've basically pasted is a whole bunch of variables set to the root of our website. This is the same as defining a variable in the Webflow style panel over here. But since we don't have complete freedom and as to what the values are of such variables, we decided to put it in a custom embed so that we have everything centralized and you don't have to find stuff in different places. Now, the size unit basically replaces the user-defined browser default font size, right? So in general, on websites, in browsers, the default is always 16 pixels. And this is what I was mentioning about users that might have set it to 20 or 24. If they want bigger text for it to be easier to read, we override any of that and we just put 16 here. But that's also because we have the table of 16 in our head and everything with 4. I'm making this too complicated. You could set this basically to whatever you want, and then any Figma value is going to be divided by the size unit to be your value in Webflow or in CSS. This will make more sense when I get to it. We have a variable for the ideal container size, which is actually just the frame size that we have in Webflow. So my frame in this case is 1440, which is what I typically design on as well. And it's also the default in Osmo. So in this case, I wouldn't have to change it, but say my frame in Figma would be 1920 pixels. I would change it over here to be the ideal container size. The minimum and maximum container sizes is the size between which all of our website will scale. So the minimum one matches the smallest size of the desktop breakpoint in Webflow, and the max in this case is 1920. But if you'd wanted to scale across a 4K desktop as well, you could set it to a obnoxiously large font size, container size if you want, but keep in mind that that might not be the best experience always. The size of the container is just going to be applied on an actual container class, and that is going to clamp the max width of that container between your minimum and maximum defined size over here. And then we have a variable called size font, and this one is what's going to actually be set to the body font size and therefore be the root of all of our sizings across the website. Now, I'm realizing that I'm making this way too technical. And over here, this is just the responsiveness of things. So say in this case, I will have a mobile frame of 402 pixels wide. So in my mobile portrait one, I'm going to define my ideal container size to be 402. And then all that's left is, in the implementation step, we've defined that we need to set the font size of our body to be the variable of size font. So let's quickly add that in here. And now we saw some things change in the background. So before I had set any fluid responsive sizing. Of course, these elements had sizes of 1 EM and 2 EM, and there was padding, but I was taking from a 16 pixel root size. Now, our root size is a variable called size font, which is based off of the viewport width. So with these already built elements, you can see that as I'm going to start scaling, all of them scale across. And actually, if I put it in preview mode, so I can scale larger than 1920, we see that at some point, the elements themselves have stopped scaling. You see now they're becoming smaller, bigger, 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 bigger. And we've hit past 1920, and they stop scaling. Now, to make sure that this thing doesn't get stretched across the entire screen, we have to make sure that the container class has a max width, which currently it does not. So let's add it to our CSS as well. Now, of course, the max width is a supported property in Webflow. So what you could also do is simply take this variable called size container and put it on the container class max width in the custom tab. This is also allowed. Now I've put a double, but just to show that you don't have to work in the embed for everything. And now we actually saw a quick nudge already happening. So now, right, everything's scaling. And I hit past 1920 and my container is fixed, so that we sort of keep a nice experience, even if we would be on an ultra-wide experience, ultra-wide desktop. And that's almost it already. Now you've heard me talk about some EM font sizes, so let's check it out. For example, this header needs a higher Z index, otherwise I can't click it. So this nav logo, right, has two elements inside, the logo name and the logo icon. And the logo name has a width of 4 EM. So this is where 4 times 16 is our root size, you remember? And that's equal because in my Figma design, I've got a 64 pixel wide logo icon over here. And I have a 24 pixel wide icon. So what we need to do is 24 divided by 16 is 1.5 EM on my width and height of the icon. And the wrapper is 200 pixel wide, so its width needs to be 12.5 EM. Now, I know that there is generally some confusion on the usage of EM and REM, so the root element modifier. And actually, if I select it now, we see that there is a quick change happening. And the thing is that with root element modifier, let's see over here, it always calculates its size, so 1.5 times that 16, right? Whereas if we use EMs, it will always take its size from the parent with the closest defined font size. So say my wrapper div would have a size of 1.5 EM. That means that my initial text is 1.5 times 16 equals 24 pixel. If I then add another element inside with a font size of 1.5 EM, what it's actually going to do is 1.5 times 24 equals a font size of 36. And that's the difference with REM, whether it would do that inner element, also 1.5, but it would times that with 16 again, and not with the 24 of the parent. Does that make sense? I hope so, with my very ugly infographic. So let's get into building this thing, right? First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a quick container with a max width of 917 pixels, which is very specific. So I've put the div in already, hero content. It's going to get a max width of 100%, centered, and then 917 divided by 16. I sometimes round things off, but I'm not going to bother right now. And I'm going to give that a vertical flex box. And then let's see, there is some spacing in between this whole part actually of 48 pixels. So that's going to be 48 divided by 16 is 3 EM spacing. Now in the hero content, I could do hero content top, which is going to be the wrapper of my 3 text elements, which has a 24 pixel or 1.5 EM gap. In there, let's start with the H1, which should be an 80 pixel font size in my design. So in my H1, I'm going to give it a font size of 5 EM because 80 divided by 16 equals 5. And I'm going to go for a unitless line height of not 0.8, yeah, 0.8. Give it a medium font weight and paste my text. There should be a space in between here. And let's make sure that my hero content top has a text line of center and a vertical flex box also centered with that 1.5 EM or 24 pixel gap. Now Webflow puts in some padding, which I don't. Oh, trying to go too quick. I don't want that. Now let's make this tag element, right? So the tag element has a 12 pixel font size text element inside, which has some padding around it, and there is a quick image, which I've already exported. So let's copy the text, and let's remember that it has 9 pixels on the top and bottom, and 12 on either side. So I'm going to put in, let's do a div, because we need to have an image inside. And let's maybe call it tag. We can set its font size to be 0.75 EM. We can set it on the wrapper thing or only on the text. It'll depend. I like to put it on the wrapper because then everything in that tag div in this case is going to be relative to this font size. So now if I put in a quick text element, which is a platform by Dennis and I, this one already has the font size of 0.75 EM or 12 pixels. Now the tag should get 9. And this time not divided by 16, but actually by 12, because we're setting the padding relative to this font size, right? So this is where the difference comes in if we going to set padding relative to this element. So we'll do 9 divided by 12 on either side. And we'll do 12 divided by 12, so that's 1 on left and right. Give it a quick background color, some border radius, and a blurry backdrop filter. And maybe because we're perfectionists, a quick white border. Let's also give it a horizontal flex box with 6 pixels. So 6 divided by 12 is 0.5 EM of a gap. I'll add a quick image, which is this one. Let's give it a tag image class. And that whole wrapper should be 24 pixels. So 24 divided by 12 is 2 EMs, of course, over here. Now we've got this thing responsive. So if we scale that down, of course, on a tiny breakpoint, this gets pretty tiny. And so you have to be mindful of that. You could define some maximum font sizes. So that's the thing that I sometimes like to do. If I feel like actually on a small desktop, this element is almost not readable, what we can do is we can go into the custom tab and we'll do a CSS max. And we'll do the 0.75 EM that we already had. We'll do a comma, and then we'll define maybe something like 12 pixel. So now the CSS max will choose whatever value is the largest of these two. So on a small breakpoint, that's going to be the 12 pixel. And then at some point, it's going to scale up with the 0.75 EM. Does that make sense? Then we'll add a div for our paragraph. So hero, I'll call it para, which is a horrible name, but I don't care right now. Copy the paragraph, and we see that it needs to be 491. So we'll do 100% width on default, so that on mobile it'll fill. And then 491 divided by 16 EMs is too many digits, so I'll just round it off to 30. And we'll give it a class of paragraph quickly. Let's see. It just should be 18 pixels and 1.3 line height, or 130%. So 118 divided by 16 EM and a 1.3 line height. All right, now we could just quickly grab this button class in here so that in our hero content, we can do a button row, which has a horizontal flexbox with 2 buttons inside. And then we'll just make sure that we'll do an 8 pixel gap, which is 0.5 EM. I'm not going to bother secondary right now. Let's just call it secondary. All right, now we basically have a responsive scaling hero section. And now we see that our first problems occur on our mobile landscape size. So here's what we should do to tackle this. On this breakpoint, which is the mobile landscape one, this one here, we'll have to tweak our container ideal size. Now, it currently matches the old mobile portrait ideal size. So technically what the website is trying to do is display the mobile design of this section on the mobile landscape one. Now, by just simply setting this to a higher number, we can already make sure that we globally sort of define the scale and size of this website. So let's set it to that size, and maybe once we get to a real phone, the sizing of elements looks almost correct, but maybe, let's see, this heading was 80 on desktop, and on mobile it's become 45. And we've already also changed some of the alignment things. So if we quickly, let's see, start left aligning some elements, set the text alignment to left, set this heading to be 45 divided by 16. The text becomes 14 pixel, not 16. So we'll do 14 divided by 16. And just make sure that we left align this stuff here as well. And I see something going on with the logo. So it's instead of 200, it's become 100. All right. And we've reduced the space here between those 2 buttons. And there we go. Of course, this is very rough and quick and dirty, but it is a nice way to sort of demonstrate how to take those numbers from Figma into Webflow and how to convert those. Let's see. A note that I like to give is that this size unit can be changed to whatever you like and prefer. I've seen people set the size unit to 10. And what that basically does is it'll take any value from Figma, just divide it by 10 or move the comma to the left once. Some people find that easier to work with. So this heading, which is 80 divided by 16, is 5 EM for me. Someone who had set the size unit to 10 in Webflow would put in 8 EM. It's whatever you prefer. I personally have that divided by 16. Everything, all those values are like stuck in my head and I sort of know my way around them. So for me, this makes more sense. But some people like other scales, so you're free to change that size unit as you see fit. Now, of course, this was sort of a rough demo, but I wanted to highlight one more thing with the EM usage. I recently published this nice project, which I really enjoyed working on, which has this cool hero visual on the right. And we see that the website scales responsively. And then as I get to a smaller breakpoint as well. But I ran into a problem here. If we open up the Webflow project of this, all these elements, if I check that out real quick, they have a size, in this case, of 12.5 EM. And all these elements are they are sized, they have a certain set size. So I had a problem when I got to the mobile breakpoint initially, where everything was just too large. So what I almost had to do was to resize all these elements and define them a different width and height, which would be annoying. Wouldn't be a huge problem, but it would be annoying. But over here, the home hero visual on mobile just got a smaller font size so that everything in here calculates its size relative to the 0.65. So if we undo that, we see the initial problem that I had. Everything was too big. So by simply setting a parent element to a smaller font size, everything will be scaling. And now this is slightly different than simply setting a transform on scale, because a transform requires calculations by the browser and would trigger a repaint, if I'm not mistaken. And in this case, you just set a font size and everything will scale relative to that font size. You could play around with it if you want. I've seen people use this on like a cookie banner pop-up. Maybe inside the cookie banner pop-up, you have a global class for your paragraph, p regular. But on mobile, you need that to be a smaller one. And then you'd have to add a combo class or a unique class to the cookie pop-up, and it would just be a bit annoying maybe. So then what you could just do on mobile, if you want that only div, just everything to be a bit smaller, you just set the font size of that div to like 0.8 EMs and everything scales down responsively, which is nice. And I thought this was a great use case to demonstrate how that can benefit you in like real projects. So if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you. And sort of as an extra bonus and an incentive to join us on Osmo and explore all of these cool resources that we got, I can hereby offer you a discount code of Osmo10. And if you use that during checkout, we will give you 10% discount on your first month. And you will be able to access all of these resources that are inside of the vault. And we're adding multiple resources every single week, so the vault will keep growing. We got some really cool plans to add to in the future. Like recently, we launched our icon library, which are SVG icons available to copy as SVG code, Webflow elements, or just simply download to your file system, to your desktop. There's 150 or more than that in here. And it's just great, like whenever you're in a project and you need like an Instagram logo, you could just search for it and copy it for your project. So yeah, stuff like this, much more cooler stuff coming as well to the platform. So make sure to join us. I'll put a link in the description. If you have any questions regarding the sizing system, you can ask them in our Slack community if you're a member, or here in the comments, and I'll see if I can help you out. Have a nice day and see you in the next one.